Hi everyone, I'm Erin Underwood, and today I'm interviewing nominees in the novel category of the 2022 Shirley Jackson Awards, which recognize outstanding achievement in the literature of psychological suspense, horror, and dark fantasy. As of the time that we're doing this recording, the winners for this year's Shirley Jackson Awards have not yet been announced, and we will be sure to add that information to the notes below as soon as that is available. Now, I'm delighted to introduce Christi Nogle, whose novel Beulah, published by Cemetery Gates Media, was nominated for this year's 2022 Shirley Jackson Awards. Christi is a novelist and anthology editor, and she has won and been nominated for multiple Bram Stoker Awards. And I'm delighted that she is able to join me here today. Christi, welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Erin. I'm so glad to be on here. I should correct, though, I only won one for Beulah, but I was nominated also for an anthology called Mother, Tales of Love and Terror.
Oh, great. So you were nominated for the Bram Stoker and you won a Bram Stoker, but two different Bram Stokers.
Yeah, just one win, though. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, good. So for our audience who may not be familiar with Beulah, could you just give them a quick little summary or a little tidbit on what they can expect with the novel?
Sure. So Beulah is a story about a girl who's sensitive to ghosts. She can see and hear ghosts. And she happens to be brought to a place. In this case, it's an old schoolhouse that her family wants to renovate. But she's brought to a place that has a lot of ghosts. And it's not just the schoolhouse, but it's the entire town of Beulah, Idaho, that is just kind of especially thick with ghosts. So she's having a hard time, but she's maintaining. But then her little sister starts to see them too and starts to be kind of a target. And the way that I describe the novel, it sounds like a fairly conventional coming of age type of novel, but it's written in a way that's a little bit more experimental or unconventional.
That sounds great. So is it technically then more of a YA category novel because of the age of the characters?
I'd say definitely not. It sounds that way a little bit in just the plot description.
Yeah. So, okay, I love ghost stories, one of my favorite types of stories, so I'm definitely very interested here. What kind of inspired Beulah? Did you just have your own ghostly experience, or were you like, hey, I have this really great idea for a ghost story? How did this come about?
There were lots and lots of different things inspired the novel. I'd say probably the primary thing is a lot of the reading I had done, of course, The Haunting of Hill House and so many Stephen King novels and Beloved by Toni Morrison. I also had observed for a long time my mother's really intense fear of heights. And this gets covered a little bit in the novel. And I was an observer of this, kind of seeing it from outside. And gradually over the years, I realized that I had a similar phobia of, the fear of the dark. But it just didn't ever manifest in a way where people were observing it the way that we always did of my mother's fear. But I'd say those phobias definitely influenced the novel as well.
That's interesting. I could see how that works as a person who has fear of heights as well. Fear is a transferable thing. And so I could definitely see how that kind of pulls together and would be an inspiration. So your characters, you have an older sister and a younger sister. What kind of relationship do they have in the novel? And how young is the youngest sister when she starts seeing ghosts? Is she very, very young and that's why she becomes a target? Or not to give away spoilers, but
There are actually 3 sisters in the novel, and the 2 are older, like 18 and 17.
Mhm.
And then the younger sister's around 10 years old. And she has a birthday during the novel. And yeah, I think it is her youth and just her naivete that makes her a little bit more vulnerable.
Interesting. I think that actually makes perfect sense. So when you were writing this, you have 3 girls, and do you have sisters yourself? How much of your own experience went into the novel?
Yeah, so I actually have a half sister who's about 10 years older than I am, but I wasn't really raised around her or anything like that. So I think part of the inspiration there was always wanting to have siblings or just people around, neighbor kids or something. So it was a little bit of wish fulfillment type of writing in that way.
Excellent. So you have won a Bram Stoker, and you've been nominated for a Bram Stoker. So you've got a nomination here for Shirley Jackson. So you're clearly, in the horror and dark fiction, psychological thriller category. What is it about this type of fiction that, I don't know, that maybe pulls you to it, or that you really enjoy writing about?
Wow. I feel like I came to it primarily as a reader at first. So
Mhm.
I love all kinds of literature. I have a literature degree, and I just was an avid reader from the time I was very, very young, of all sorts of stuff, but horror in particular. And I would say also horror adjacent literary fiction and thrillers and mystery, and that whole kind of area of fiction. I love it so much because I think it pulls me in a way that other literature doesn't always do. It immerses me. I lose track of time. And as for why that is, I don't know. Probably it has something to do with feeling like dark literature is more real or more authentic than literature that is less dark.
Yeah, I can see that. I grew up reading all kinds of literature as well, but I have a special love for horror fiction and dark literature. I feel like I feel like there's so much more to explore in the shadows. Like, you never know what you're gonna find there, and it's often, like you said, much more real than just surface level things that you might find in maybe other stories. Um, You mentioned some of your inspirations, or some of the other authors that you love to read. Shirley Jackson, of course, Stephen King. Are there any other inspirations in that literary field that kind of really inspired you to either read or write?
Yeah, so I'm actually rereading some of my favorite novels this
Oh, I
year.
love rereading novels.
I've enjoyed it so much, and I have some of my favorites here. Actually, I'm not just rereading novels; I'm rereading also some anthologies and short fiction collections. Um, Ellen Datlow's anthologies are inspiring. Stephen Graham Jones,
Oh, they're
um,
both fantastic.
love. Kazuo Ishiguro is another that I keep rereading. Never Let Me Go. I just reread. Shirley Jackson, Toni Morrison, John Langan. I just love the novel The Fisherman in particular. Elizabeth Hand,
Oh, love her.
Samantha Schweblin, Kelly Link, Carmen Maria Machado, uh, Gwendolyn Keist. Those are just a few.
I think you just listed like a summer reading list for people. I love the fact that you are actually rereading work. And I think that's something that's really important. And a lot of people maybe don't do it as much as, I don't know, as much as I do, or perhaps as much as you do. When you reread that second time, um, do you ever get the sense that the story is different or the same, or is it just, what do you get out of that second? I guess what I'm getting at is, what do you get out of that reread experience that's different from the first experience?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the novel.
Yeah.
I think when I first read something, especially if it's from an author that I'm already familiar with and love, I'm often just kind of fangirling, I'm just like, yay, I'm getting to read this thing. And so I maybe don't look at it as critically or in as much depth as I otherwise would. And so on the rereading, I'm maybe analyzing it a bit more, seeing how it works and what elements they've put together. But it can be different things too. Sometimes they'll focus on a different character on the reread or something like that.
That makes sense. So we've talked a bit about you, your history a little bit, your family, your reading. Let's go back to Beulah. I want to know, like, as a writer, I know that when we go through these things and we're writing, there often are these moments that are surprising or especially difficult to, in that writing process. Were there any moments in Beulah that were, especially fun for you to write, or difficult or surprising? Anything that really stood out?
Yeah. A part of it, two scenes of it just came to mind when you were talking about this. I mentioned that it's kind of unconventional, and part of the reason it's unconventional is the character is what I call laconic, just kind of a lazy character. I love her. I think she's very sweet, but I think to some readers she seems frustrating because they're expecting a character who's more of the hero of their own story or something like this. But I have a scene in here where she describes this swimsuit that she went and bought in a haunted flea market, haunted thrift store. And I don't know, I just loved it. It was so out there, the way that she told people about the ghost. Of course, they don't believe her. They think she's just making it up as she tells this story. But I liked the places where this kind of weird character was extra weird, I guess.
I have to say, I just love that you have a haunted thrift store. What inspired that location? What was when you were thinking about, where is she going to go get this swimsuit? And were you like, wait, a haunted thrift store? Like, what made you come up with that particular location? Or is there anything about other locations that kind of stood out as especially fun to write?
Oh, I don't know. My partner is always saying that you shouldn't wear the clothes of the dead or something like that. And so whenever I go into a thrift store, especially like the clothing department, I kind of think about that, think about how intimate these objects were with the people who used to own them. And you think about it being haunted and so on. As for other locations, there are a lot of locations in the novel that I would say kind of composite locations. So, for example, the schoolhouse that the character's in is located in a street or on a street that roughly corresponds to a street in Emmett, Idaho, that I used to be familiar with. But the character has a view of the Snake River Canyon, which is actually nowhere near there. So there are different ways in which different Idaho locations are kind of layered. And I found that interesting and kind of fun to play with.
So are you from Idaho, or you said you've been there? Did you used to live there?
Oh, I live in Idaho right now, and
I
I've
still live in Idaho.
yeah,
Excellent.
since I was about 11 years old. I've lived in different locations in Idaho.
Nice. It's such a beautiful, beautiful state. On an off topic, my brother's was from Idaho, so
Oh,
nice. So when you were in your early stage writing process and you were coming up with the idea for Beulah, like, what are the early stages for when you were kind of plotting out a ghost story? How, I guess I'm just curious, can you share maybe a little bit of your process in that early stage plotting to kind of figure out how am I going to tell a ghost story that, that engages me and the readers all the way through?
Yeah. So this was my very first novel. I really didn't know what I was doing at all. The first
Shirley,
draft,
you're doing a great job.
the first draft of this novel was very different. So the current novel was the backstory, and the first draft was set 20 or 30 years into the future, with the character obviously middle-aged and kind of looking back on things. So I worked with that for a while, and I think that, I didn't get any feedback to change it so that the story was the backstory. But after working on it and, trying to revise it, I realized that the more immediate story was that earlier story from her teenage years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you write a lot of short stories as well. You edit a lot of anthologies. Is that right?
I'm working on my second. Yeah.
Excellent. And are they primarily horror as well, or a mixture?
I worked on an anthology, the one that was nominated for the anthology category for the Bram Stoker, called Mother Tales of Love and Terror.
Mm-hmm.
It was primarily horror. There were dark science fiction and dark fantasy stories as well, but it was primarily horror. And then right now I am working on an anthology with Ai Zhang for shortwave publishing called Wilted Pages, an anthology of dark academia. And it is also primarily horror with some fabulism, dark science fiction, and dark fantasy.
That sounds awesome. I can't wait for that anthology to come out.
That's great.
And so I'm just putting like two and two together here. You've written or published one novel, and you've published one anthology set. And they've both been nominated for really the most prestigious awards in horror fiction. Am I right? That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive, Christi.
Oh, thank you so much. It was such an honor to be nominated, and I was so blown away to get nominated for the Shirley Jackson as well.
Yeah, I honestly love the Shirley Jackson Awards. They are definitely my favorite horror fiction awards. So I jumped at the chance to interview the novelists for the category. So this is very exciting to me. And Christi, we're just about at time. But before we go, I wanted to ask you, we've already talked a bit about the anthology that you're editing, the new anthology that you're editing. What else do you have coming up, or do you have any appearances or anything else that that readers that you might want to share with readers?
Yeah, I have an appearance, a reading at Readercon on Saturday, of the Readercon, and then I have a short fiction collection out right now called The Best of Our Past, The Worst of Our Future. It's actually the first of 3 that'll be coming from Flame Tree Press. The second one is called Promise, and it should come out in September, and it's already on NetGalley if anybody's a reviewer.
Awesome. That sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Christi. It's such a pleasure to have you here today.
It was so great talking with you. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome, and good luck. I can't have any favorites for the Shirley Jacksons, of course, but good luck, and I wish you the absolute best with the nomination and with the upcoming anthologies as well.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you everyone for watching. The 2022 Shirley Jackson Awards will be announced on July 15, 2023 at Readercon, the Conference of Imagination and Literature. Jeff VanderMeer and Ann VanderMeer will be our ceremony hosts. As a reminder, the awards are run by volunteers on a shoestring budget, and they're always happy to receive a donation just to keep the lights on. So please visit shirleyjacksonawards.org for more information. Again, thank you for watching and supporting the Shirley Jackson Awards.